I used to be ashamed of my past and unsure if I'd make it to where I was going. But I knew one thing was for certain. We don't end up where we're going on accident. I've also learned that we can't erase the past or hide from it, but we can learn from it and pass it on to others. So who am I? I'm the definition of a bootstrap girl. Someone who's made the hard choices to pick themselves back up and make something of themselves. And I'm not the only one. My name is Denisha. I'm a mom, a wife, a professor, advocate, queen of my own path, who's overcome abuse, foster care, homelessness, and raising 5 siblings on my own at the age of 24. And eventually I got a PhD. But something that I learned is that I don't know everything. So here on my show, we're going to be bringing in people who know the things that we don't know. Let's get in and learn on the Dr. Denisha Keating Show.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Denisha Keating Show. I am super excited to have Francine here, my new friend. We are getting back to the conversation of listening to understand 2 different points of view. It is the table talk conversation between 2 friends where we're trying to understand where the other person might be coming from in a particular situation. And we're inviting you to be the fly on the wall to see how we're going to navigate the questions, maybe the emotions that come with the conversation, but you're going to be the fly on the wall to hear how we're managing all of the various topics that we're having. One of the things is that we're not allowed to yell, scream, we can cry it out, but we're having to actually listen to understand versus listening to respond. So Francine, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and take it away, and then we're going to jump into our conversation for today.
I'm Francine Julene, otherwise known as Princess Francie. And
hello.
This book was written about me.
Oh my God, I love it. Okay.
I wrote this book, and it's about my inner child and her friend Sparkle Feathers. He's that kooky creature up over my shoulder here.
Hi, Sparkle Feathers.
Sparkle Feathers takes Princess Francie and a group of kids through the magic library, which is meditation.
Okay.
And teaches them how to feel comfortable in their own skin.
Okay. So we might have to actually jump in on that first before we jump into our main topic. So and I feel like this goes back into what we're going to be talking about is breaking the cycle of negative childhood programming. So with being comfortable in someone's skin, what do you mean by that? And why is that such an important thing for us to be able to understand?
Okay, let me start. Growing up, I was that fat child. And I remember my aunt saying, "You be such a pretty girl if you just lost some weight." Well, that was my negative childhood programming. And that led me on a lifelong path of disordered eating. Whether it was comfort eating, which got me up to over 230 pounds at one point, or going on all these weird fad diets and unhealthy eating, trying to lose weight. And I remember thinking my whole life, especially in the military, if I could just lose 20 pounds, everything would be better. I'd be happy. Well, guess what? I lost 100 pounds and I still wasn't happy because I still had that negative childhood programming.
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes, there's so much just right there. Because there are so many other people who have probably heard that from someone is like, you would be pretty if you took, did your hair this way, looked like this, that a lot of us will pick up some sort of body shame in its entirety. Maybe it's weight, maybe it's how we look, maybe it's even our gender, where we're just looking at these things and going, I'm just not who I'm meant to be. And you said that we need to work through that to feel comfortable in our skin. So how did you start to move from, I just need to lose 20 pounds and I'm still not happy with this, to like, I need to just find comfort in my own skin?
Well, the funny thing is I tried to start a business, but I was so unhealthy and so unhappy, it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And I was a holistic health coach, but I still weighed over 200 pounds. But I'm like, ooh, I lost that 20 pounds. It's all going to happen now.
Yeah.
I hired a business coach and an holistic health coach to try to figure out why I'm losing weight. I'm trying to get healthy, but I'm still not happy. And guess what? they both told me to meditate. Well,
Okay.
I'm this type A person. I was in the Navy and the Army, so I led this life of craziness. And I thought, me meditate? I can't just sit there and not think, right? But that's not what meditation is.
Okay.
And when I started learning about meditation, taking a deep dive into learning more about meditation, and I started really practicing meditation because it's just like learning a new sport. It takes practice. Once I started practicing and feeling the benefits, I wanted to do it more and feel more of the benefits. And it's just like, well, and I'm told this because I never got a runner's high because no matter how many times I ran in the
You're
military,
like,
I
never.
am not a runner.
Nope.
But I hear that people who do like it and enjoy it get this runner's high. Well, I learned how to get a meditation high.
Oh no.
And
Okay.
I don't need that comfort eating anymore. I don't need to drink 2 bottles of wine a day anymore. I don't need all that other stuff that I was using to try to make myself feel better.
So you said a buzzword. You said meditation. You said the scary word. And I know some listeners might feel that that's also the same as when we try to look at a situation and we just wish it into existence. So with meditation, you said, you were practicing and then you started to feel better. What exactly did that meditation look like that was for you, specifically for you? Because you said it. You said like how I was feeling was influencing my results, and I would lose this weight, then I still wasn't content or happy. So what did that meditation experience? What did you do? What does it mean by practicing? And then can you walk me through that?
Yes. These two coaches, the business coach and the health coach, both told me to get up from behind my desk at lunchtime and go for a walk. I was coming toward the end of my career with the military.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? I was an aircraft electrician for the military for 30 years. That was my whole identity. So I needed to find a new identity. So during my breaks at work, I was studying, I was researching, I was doing. And they both told me, instead of doing, just be. So I went out. Well, yeah, it was. I went out on walks, and I couldn't, at first, just be. So I found Abraham Hicks videos on YouTube. And I started listening because one of the titles caught my attention, and it was about being rather than doing. Don't be a human doer, be a human being.
Oh, man.
And then as I listened to more of the Abraham Hicks videos, and I walked, I started losing more weight. I started getting healthier, and I go back to work more refreshed and less angry, less frustrated, and people started noticing the difference in me and wanting to know what I was doing.
Okay, so we're going to back up a little bit. So when I think meditation, I don't think of just walking and just being and just really, like you said, stop doing something. Stop, because I'm a doer by nature. Like, I will do things all day. But you asked you to sit still or to just silent for a minute to allow my body and my mind time to rest, and that's what you're doing. It just looks different. You're not sitting, because like when I think meditation, I think of what the TV shows where you're sitting there and you're like, don't move, and I'm always like, like, but you're saying like, no, you can go on a walk and like you can turn on music, but just getting your body to don't listen to another podcast, don't listen to another book that you're trying to read, like put something soothing on to allow for your body and mind to rest.
Yes.
Now, you said your identity was wrapped up in what you did in the Navy and the Army.
Correct.
Now, first, thank you so much for serving. Thank you for that. We would not be here without service people. But then there's this loss of identity when you move from something you've done. And you said you can't have it wrapped up in what you do. Like, that's what I'm hearing, is maybe you didn't say it specifically, but like I heard, like, okay, don't get wrapped up in what you do. Be wrapped up in who you are as a human being. Like, you're not your weight. You are Francine. You're not your job title. You are Francine. So I have struggled with a lot of panic and anxiety, and I have found at the core, it really comes down to being afraid of losing things or afraid of not being in control. Walk me through what I can do to help kind of let go of it's okay to not be in control. What would the meditation look like for me?
One thing I love doing was walking in nature, because you never know what you will find. You could go with a plan. Well, I'm going to walk here and I'm going to see this, and then I'm going to feel this way. But I would take these walks down to the river. Luckily, I worked on a Navy base, and we had this beautiful marina and nature center. And I'd go down to and there would be a sailboat going by. Well, there's no way I could have planned that person would be sailing by at that moment in time, but it was so peaceful watching that. I would take a walk into the nature center, and butterflies would just float around me. You can't plan for that. It's community with nature. Or one day, there was a family of baby armadillos playing right there in front of me.
That's really cute.
It's being in the moment.
Yeah.
Being in the moment.
Okay.
And taking the time. If I was reading a book, or if I was not paying attention, I would have missed out on all that beauty, all that nature, all that calmness.
Yeah. So I live in a city. So for me, I would have to travel a little bit to get to nature. But what comes to my head is like, put the phone down and go on a walk. And now me and my panic, because this is how my brain works, I'm like, but in the city, it's like, and there's a car and it might hit you because they're going really fast. So maybe finding like a hiking trail, or maybe finding a park, maybe finding something, maybe driving to where there's a hiking trail with a lake. There's one that's like 45 minutes away, but like I could go and walk it. And then there's like, you can get down to a river. But you're right. Like, it's the unplugging from the doing and the crazy busyness and the scrolling to remove ourselves and be present. Now, would this also work with being present with other people?
During this time when I really I was an aircraft electrician. Well, because of arthritis, I couldn't use hand tools anymore, and they stuck me in a desk job in security.
How dare they?
This girl's not meant to sit behind a desk.
Yeah.
And then my coworkers and I didn't quite vibe. That's the nicest way of saying it. We didn't really vibe.
Right.
I was constantly frustrated. I wasn't being used up to my capacity. I wasn't being appreciated. And it was menial, data input, doing fingerprints, making ID cards.
Yeah.
Just a job I really did not like. A necessary job nonetheless, but one that didn't fulfill me. And I would go home angry. I'd get home and yell at the dogs, leave me alone, until I drank a couple glasses of wine. Okay, now I could feel. And then I'd be so tired, I'd have to take a nap before bed. I was taking hands full of medication because I was so unhealthy. And it just wasn't a pleasant existence. Well, once I started taking these lunchtime breaks, going for these walks, communing with nature, I would go home, and the first thing I would do was go play with the dogs. which was so much happier, so much
Yeah.
healthier. And then
Yeah.
next thing I knew it, I inspired my husband to come too. We cut a trail around our house,
Oh.
and we would go for family. We had one old dog who didn't walk well. So we
Yeah.
would all go walk around the house a couple
Okay.
times and just get some exercise, be together, and have some fun.
Yeah. So you brought up something that at first I started to, I'm taking notes, by the way. That's why I keep looking down. It helps me be quiet so I can listen. But you said something where you said, okay, my hands, you said arthritis.
Yes.
Okay. There are so many people who it's like, well, I have this physical disability that's how we stop there. And what you said was, but that wasn't what it was. It was the feeling of not living up to your potential, not the actual arthritis in the hands. Because there's so many other jobs you can do, but you were like, I was doing stuff that I didn't enjoy doing. But instead of just saying, well, I'm not living up to my full potential, you said, what can I do in this moment? And what I can do is go home and play with the dogs and walk. And that to me is such an indication that sometimes what we do is in our mindset is we stop right there and say, well, this is the problem. And then it's like, okay, but what can we do with it? There's nothing really I can do about my arthritis. There's nothing I can really do about the type of job I'm doing that I don't feel fulfilled about right now. But what I can do is I can go on a walk. I can still have joy and still find rest and peace and not be so angry by simply going and walking. Now, after time, what did that do to make you look at different avenues? Because you right now, you do a lot, obviously doing a ton of speaking stuff. When you got on, you're like, I'm so sorry, I do so many of these. And I'm like, that is so cool that you do all of these kind of things. Like, you're not really using your hands. You're not using your background of what you were in the military at all. So now it's kind of like you've created this own space. So the meditation, how did that lead you to something like this? Because that's so different when you're like, oh, I was in the military and I did all these things. It's like, how did you end up here? Because this is really cool. Like, how did that happen from the meditation? Because you wouldn't have gotten there without like taking those breaks, stepping away, and then finding fulfillment with where you were at in contentment now, but still being able to find other things to do.
I have a background in organizational change. So when it came time for me to make all these changes in my life, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I took all the tools that we used in Six Sigma and industrial engineering and organizational change, and I applied them to personal change. And I wrote my first book. And quite frankly, it was a little boring. It was a little clinical. It was a dry. Yeah. But what that did, it opened the neural paths in my brain to say, oh, you know what? I'm not just an aircraft electrician. I meditated some more. And remember, I told you that I went on this deep dive.
Yeah.
I just was all in.
Yeah.
So my friend Charlie runs this soul travel class. It's nothing more than a group meditation, and we go to all these different places together in our minds. Well, I took this class. It was my first time in a live meditation with other people. And that's where I met Sparkle Feathers. And Sparkle Feathers told me my mission is to go out and tell children that it's not what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside. So I'm thinking children, because I don't have children. I lost that fertility battle. And I almost put up a wall to protect myself around children. So when I'm thinking children, I'm thinking high school, I'm thinking early college. So I took that first dry, boring book, and I used Sparkle Feathers and Princess Francie and turned that boring self-help book into a fairy tale. And then people really started taking notice of my 6-step process of personal change. I had people between the ages of 8 and 80 telling me how much my process helped them. And then I did another meditation, and I was led to protect the children before they need to be fixed later in life. Let's build strong and confident kids today so we don't have to fix them later. And through a series of meditations, I came to grades 1 through 5 is where they're building all of their habits. That's
Yeah.
where they're being programmed. So let's program them properly before they get to middle school when they're trying to be like everybody else, when there's all the peer pressure, when they're trying to form their own identities. Get them on the right track before they get there.
And it's interesting because you're saying that the strong and confident child is going to be a stronger and confident teenager and become a stronger and confident adult because they're not being told like your confidence is built on from it's on the outside. Your strength is not from how you look on the outside. It's actually what comes from within. So, I just kind of laughed for a minute in my brain. I didn't laugh verbally because I didn't want to make it look like I was laughing at you. But internally, I was laughing because I was like, when I asked you, hey, if I'm struggling with panic and anxiety, which I have, you didn't say like, well, do this breathing exercise and then do this, do that, do this. You didn't even say do. You said get outside and go on a walk and do that repeatedly as many times as you can. Get yourself to stop doing and just start being. And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? I have a background in psychology, and we're not taught that. We're taught do something. And I mean, going outside and walking is doing something. But you said like go out and just be you, get out of the doing rush, because that's really where the panic and the anxiety comes in, is the rushing, the feeling and not being adequate. But it's even deeper than that, where you brought it down to like I wasn't wired to feel strong. And I wasn't wired originally to feel confident, which is why as an adult, there's so many times that I have felt like I'm an imposter faking it because I'm like, I'm kind of a strong adult and kind of confident, but there's that little kid in me that I've been working on rewiring, saying, hey, no, like you didn't do anything wrong. Like that wasn't a weird thing because you laugh really loud with your belly, or it's not weird that you have anxiety because you get scared. You feel deeply. That's not weird. And that's what it'd been reiterated for so long. It's really weird that you feel that big. It's really bad to have big emotions. And you're like, if we can help kids understand, they're going to be confident adults. But you're saying it doesn't matter where you're at. Because what someone might hear is like, well, shoot, I didn't get that as a kid, so I guess I'm screwed as an adult. And you're like, no, hold on, pause. As an adult, you can work on it. In your teenagers, you work on it. And 1 through 5, you can work on it. Even as a toddler, you can start building strong and confident children.
Yes.
So you said you had a 6-step process.
Yes.
Can you walk me through that? What are the 6 steps?
The 6th step is to quiet your mind, usually by getting out there, taking a walk, meditating, calming down. I remember when I first started, I would get in the bathtub and force myself to sit still for 10 minutes.
That was so hard.
Now, an hour and a half later, I'm like, oh, I've been in here a long time, haven't I? Because I'm really comfortable just sitting there and being. So that's the step 1. Okay. Then you have to start analyzing, self-reflection, and really considering how you got where you are now. That's where I figured out if you just lost some weight, you'd be a pretty girl. That's where I figured out my mom was a warrior, and I was raised with a warrior. I was programmed to worry. And then my mom, because she was a worrier, she had all those big feelings about what she worried about. And I felt like I had to take care of her. Well, what I learned is don't worry about things you have no control over.
I love that. Have you heard the phrase that says we worry about 100% of the things and 99.9% of them don't even happen? I was like,
yes, exactly.
Okay, so quiet the mind. Analyze, self-reflection.
Then figure out the root cause. The root cause. What? Because in industry, on an assembly line, you could fix components all day long that didn't come out the end of the assembly line properly. But if you fix what was causing it at the beginning, you wouldn't create all these broken items. So, what caused what you consider to be a problem?
Okay.
What caused my aunts to say, you'd be a pretty girl if you just lost some weight? Because to them, looking good was more important than being healthy. It was what you looked like. I had two aunts who were almost sickly, too skinny. And then my dad and his other sister were obese.
Yeah.
So, how could one family be so polarly different? And it wasn't the weight. The
No,
weight was the
yeah.
symptom.
It was the symptom, not the cause.
Exactly. They had to get down to the root cause. And of course, I never really met my grandparents, so I couldn't analyze that part of it. But just realizing that I come from this family that has this issue, that it's not me, it's how I was raised, but it wasn't their fault because it's how they were raised.
Right.
So that's where I came up with this breaking the cycle, because my parents were raised by their parents, who were raised by their parents, and their parents came from old Russia. So that was a whole different story.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
From Russia?
yes,
Oh, there's a lot there.
Pre-revolution Russia, they
Oh, no.
escaped
Yeah.
because of religious persecution. So
Oh,
that's a
no.
whole different story. So
Yeah.
if you, for me, the root cause goes all the way back to Russia. So maybe I'll never figure out the exact root cause, but I can know that it doesn't have to control me, because I am here now, being in today's society, and
Yeah.
I have to put the rest of it behind.
Mm. Okay. So there's two more, right? Three more.
Yes. And then after that, after you figure out the root cause, what are you going to change? What are you going to change to make it better? And for me, the change I had, the cycle I had to break was I guess you could call me an addict. I was addicted to everything to make me feel good,
Yeah.
rather than using my brain to feel good. I was drinking the wine and eating the wrong foods and candy and cookies and cakes, and doing, you know, well, antidepressants, you name it.
And
I tried
nothing
it.
was helping.
Nothing was helping, because it was all up here. Just like my aunts and my dad and his other sister, the symptoms were weight issues, but it was an
It was
addictive
here.
behavior that caused it. They just went about making themselves feel good in different ways.
And it's interesting because you say, in a way I was an addict, and I have seen that in my own behavior. Is like we all have an addictive personality to something. But when you have experienced some sort of trauma, or you've experienced some sort of life altering event that is out of your control, you do pick up the notion, well, I can't change what happened, but we can change what we do going forward. And a professor once told me, he told a class, but it stuck with me, is he's like, look, before you turned 18, you couldn't control what was happening in your life when it came to your parents' choices. But after 18, you're in the driver's seat. What are you going to do with it? And I was like, dang, like I was 20 at that point. And I was like, that's some knowledge. Like, what am I going to do with it? And that's what you said. You're like, okay, so you have recognized something, you looked at the root. Now what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to work through this? But you have to, what I'm hearing you say is like, you have to be honest with yourself. What am I doing by picking it up currently? And what can I change of how I'm picking that up? So what are the last two steps?
And then the last step is you make the change.
Mm-hmm.
And then the step after that is sustain it. Sustain it. Or you could start the cycle all over again, because there's always room for improvement. No matter
100%.
how good I get, there's always something that can be better.
And I think it's really funny because I sit with a lot of people who are really good at analyzing and we know what the root is. We're not so good at being like, okay, now let me change this. We do sit in that. A lot of us, and I'm going to be honest with myself too, sometimes I sit in that and just like, it's too much work to change it. So how can I start, like, what can I walk my mind through when I'm like, it's too hard to change it? How can I change that mindset because I really want to grow, but how do I start the action?
Visualize how good it will be when you get there. And sometimes that's difficult for me.
Yeah.
Being a normal weight was not something I could visualize, because even in the military, I was a woman on the Fat Boys program back in the early 80s, because they didn't have a Fat Girls program back then. So I was out every afternoon after work, working out with the guys and going through all of their Fat Boys program.
They call it a Fat Boys program?
They did. They probably don't anymore, but yes, back in the early 80s,
so sad.
it was the Fat Boys program.
That's not nice.
No.
I hope they change that. That's really sad. That makes me so sad. Like, I would feel so like, I'm in the what program? Like, that makes me, anyway, sorry. No, that's so sad.
But I couldn't visualize not being in that situation.
Right.
So you could trick your mind into thinking it. And one way of doing it is to write your future story. Write what you want your life to be when everything is perfect.
Yeah.
And read it 3, 4, 5 times a day.
Yeah.
Get those neural paths in your brain. Start thinking and feeling the way you want to be, because you have to feel it before you can achieve it.
I love that you said that, because I remember hearing that someone said that and I didn't believe it. And I remember driving in my car, and I had been homeless. I moved 33 different times from 18 to 24 years old after being in foster care. And I just remember, I was telling my husband this yesterday. I was like, I remember like vividly sitting in my car pretending to be on a stage telling my story. And I would be crying in my car because I'm like, I don't see it. And I don't feel it, but I'm going to fake it until one day I hope I can stand from stage and say I didn't quit. And even though I was in the midst of wanting to quit and like usually driving somewhere to go quit something, and then I would kind of talk myself out of it. Like, okay, maybe I should keep going. And it like, I was telling him last night, I'm like, and now I'm here. And sometimes it's hard because I'm not finding that contentment, not because I don't know if it's contentment, but more of like, now I see a bigger thing. And I didn't realize like that was even out there when I was 18, 19, 20, 22 driving in my car. I couldn't imagine what I had today. But now I'm like, more so in tears of like, look at how more opportunities I never knew existed. And I want to be able to be on that stage to say I didn't just stop here because I've reached the whole goal, but like I'm content. Like I feel good with what I have accomplished and have. But there's part of me that's like, oh, okay, now the calling is higher. Now the purpose is higher. Now the stages are going to be bigger. And I sit there and I'm like, I can't imagine it sometimes where I'm like, that feels weird. But I'm like, but I know I've been here before. But it started at that low, I'm literally homeless, pretending to be on a stage, bawling in my car and being like, what would I say if I were to stand on stage? And someone said, how did you not give up? And I remember when I was driving, there was one particular scene that keeps going through my head. As I was driving, I was like, I made it, I hope. And like then just started crying even harder, and I had to pull over, and I was like, am I even gonna make it? Am I just lying to myself? But it was that moment of just like, I need to tell my brain we're okay. I need to remind my brain that like it's the situation that feels so big I don't have to stop here. But that was such a weird feeling to do because like you said, with the weight, like you didn't see yourself in that. And so it's like, I didn't see myself being healthy. and being emotionally healthy. So I'm like, you just got to keep pushing through. And even though like at that time, I'm like, that advice is dumb. That advice is not good. But it's funny now that it's like, now that I'm on this side, I'm like, oh, here's some of the steps. But it also started with like, you cannot give up. You have to tell yourself, look in the mirror and be like, I will make it. And that it's because that's such a pivotal thing for helping our brain say, maybe I can do it too. So what would you tell someone who maybe they've been told their whole life that they will amount to nothing? Maybe it's not a weight thing. Maybe it's more of just they will amount to nothing. How would you walk them through that feeling?
The funny thing is, when I told my dad I wanted to join the military because he wouldn't pay for me to go to college, he said, oh, you won't even make it through boot camp. So I lived that experience.
Yeah.
And that made me want to make it through even more. Remember, I told you, I'm not a runner.
Yeah.
It was my dad's words saying, you won't make it through boot camp, that made me get through that run to get out of boot camp.
Yeah. You're like, you don't know. Now, let's pause there for a second, because I know some people would be like, yeah, but he lit a fire underneath you. When he told you that, did it feel like he was doing it as an encouragement, or did it feel like he was like literally like he knew without a doubt in his head? He's like, yeah, no, not for you. What was it like for you?
He didn't make it through boot camp, therefore his daughter couldn't make it through boot camp.
Pause. I love that. I love that you have dug into that, because he spoke from his experience and tried to apply it to you, which is ironically is what I have seen so many people speak of when they say something to someone. It has nothing to do with trying to light a fire under someone or be like, let me reverse psychology them. It's not that. It literally what it is that they didn't. So they go, you're not gonna be able to do it.
Yeah. The same thing happened. I was working I built wire harnesses, and there were 20 some odd electricians in this big room, and we built wire harnesses together.
Okay.
We were all electricians in the military at some point in time in our careers.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, I got home from Iraq and I got my bachelor's degree with my post 9/11. I decided I want to go further and get my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, why are you doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because I want to move up to the next level. Well, what's wrong with where you are now? You have a good job. You make good money. What's wrong? But that was them saying, I can't do it. Why should you?
And why, maybe not even why should you, but you can't because I didn't. And right. I think that really is a different conversation, because it's not a like, hey, why are you doing this? More curious. It literally is them saying, I don't have the skills, the ability, the intelligence to do it. If you came from me or you're in my circle, why do you think you should or could or would? And it really is, they're speaking from there was something like I put it in a book. So I've written 2 books, but one of the books I said is like, sometimes people will speak from their inability to do something and they put it on you as if it is your inability to also do that thing. They're speaking from their own experience and ability to do something, not from your ability to do something. So this is where it is so important for us to dig into those steps that you talked about of like, okay, so that came from their lineage. That was their ability, or that's where they decided to kind of stop. But that doesn't have to be my route. That doesn't have to be where I stop. So did you finish your master's?
I did, and I am all but dissertation on my doctoral degree. But I chose not to finish my dissertation.
You what?
I chose not to finish my dissertation.
That's okay. It's hard. I have a PhD. I can vouch that it is hard. But if you ever, I actually get to coach. That's part of what I do is I coach doctoral students through their dissertation. So if you ever have questions, definitely reach out and ask, because that's something I can help you with.
What happened? I was heading into the internal review.
Yeah.
And the person, the Navy captain who said I would be allowed to do my research where I worked, retired.
No.
Yeah. The new captain wouldn't let me do it.
That's
so I
hard.
To start all over again, finding a new location to do my research.
And sometimes you take a break and you come back later and you go, oh, I can do this. And sometimes you're just like, hey, I'm good now.
I have what I need. I got the education.
Yeah, you don't need the degree. I mean,
No,
it is something that it doesn't validate that does not
exactly.
validate your experience, your knowledge, your education, your self-worth. And that's where you are so grounded in who you are that you're like, I don't need that to feel accomplished or to feel worthy. And I think that's where the confidence that you have built and the strength that you have built internally allows you to sit down and go, that's fine. That part, that door wasn't for me to walk through. And that's crazy. Not crazy in a bad way, but in like a good way, because it's like, imagine for someone whoever's listening, you're the little fly on the wall with our conversation. Imagine getting to a point in your life of confidence that you are not emotionally distraught, broken down, crying because a door closed that was not for you. That you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that's fine, honestly. Go ahead.
Because it's not failure. It's catalyst for evolution.
Mm.
And I was a competitive speaker a few years ago, and I made it all the way up to the district level.
Yeah.
So it was 8 other people competing against me out of all of Central and North Florida.
Yeah.
Everyone told me, "Oh my God, you're going to win. That's the funniest speech." It was, it was a tall tale speech. It was the funniest speech. I peed in my pants. You reminded me of Lucille Ball. Oh my God, that's the best speech ever. There was a collective when I came in third, and everyone thought they were going to have to console me. And I said, you know what?
I came in third.
Right. I came in third, but then also everybody patting me on the back, giving me all that love is part of what set me down the path of writing children's books, because I do all the funny voices, I do the physical comedy, and that's what really cemented it that I ought to be talking to children, not adults.
And not because you didn't win, but it was because it's like, oh, the message is needed there too. That is so much more needed right there. Why? Like you said, like, it's not that you're against speaking to adults, but you're just like, if we can start earlier with building strength and confidence, why not?
Yeah.
Not reject. You didn't do it because, well, adults don't let me win. Like, that's not why you did it. You did it because you're like, wow, like there is a group of people that I can reach to where they're not having to live a life that's been painful, that has been hurtful, they've lost years on their life because of the worry, the stress, the anxiety, the depression, the fear. Why not take that as an opportunity to step back and say, this is the door that I got to walk in? And that I think that is so hard. I do a lot of public speaking within the foster care community, and it has been kind of eye-opening that there are so many people who are like, oh, it's a competition. You winning, you getting that opportunity means I didn't, and now like I'm not as good as you. And I'm like, oh, whoa, pause. Like, we are not doing a competition here. Like, I want you to win just as much as I'd love the opportunity, but I will not compete because there is no competition. We all bring value to the table. And I think that in so many, like, competition is actually very healthy for us. We learn a lot through competition, but so many people have been and are taking away a loss as their own, like you said, it's like the personal, this is how I identify. If I don't win this, I'm not good enough. I'm not successful. I'm not XYZ. And you're like, hey, no, that's not it.
Or you get the people who are in the mentality that it's everybody else's fault. Oh, the judges weren't fair. Oh, well, they didn't time it right.
It was rigged.
Yeah, it was rigged.
That's my favorite one. I was like, how was it rigged? And they're like, I don't know, but it was rigged. I was like,
right, yeah.
Y'all, it was not that serious.
They're against me.
Yeah.
Well, did you ever take a look at maybe it was something you did wrong? And
or like
I said, self-reflection.
It's the self-reflection, but it also, so there were, because you said it too, that it just like went in my head where I'm like, oh my God, that's it too. sometimes it's not that you did anything wrong. It's that you're supposed to go through a different door, and you went through a different door. And that actually has happened. So I've self-published all of my books. I've never been picked up for traditional publishing or anything like that. Didn't have a manager or anything like that for speaking events. I've done it all by myself. But what I have found is that I'm more knowledgeable of getting my name out there by myself without having to spend so much money on like a PR team and things like that. But it's not that anyone does that who does that is wrong. It's what was right for them. But for me, it was right for me to go through a different door and learn how to do these things so that I could help other people who want to be able to share their story and not spend a ton of money. But at first, I took on the notion that I wasn't as good, I wasn't as qualified, that I was faking it, like I wasn't really an author, I wasn't really a speaker because I didn't have a whole team behind me. And someone said, they're like, I want to challenge you on that belief. Like, why do you think you're not an author? You have a published book. You have 3 of them. Why are you saying that to yourself? And I was like, I don't even know. And then I started to hear some of the conversations around me. And it was, well, are you really an author if you didn't have someone pick you up as a traditional publisher? And I was like, well, no, self-publishing is in. Like, it's a good thing. So it opened up other doors for me. And so when you said that, I'm like, oh, that makes more sense. Like, it makes more sense. Like, it opened up a different door for me. And I should be excited about that versus, slugging my shoulders and being like, oh, I'm just not as good. I'm just not as qualified. It's like, no. And like you said, the PhD did not qualify you. You were already qualified before that with your knowledge and experience and drive. The degree.
I wrote it. Instead of getting my dissertation published, I published a book about it.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, you got to walk through a different door because you didn't stop, because you didn't let yourself get to a point of just being like, well, I'm just not as good. Like, you didn't do what other people did in your life that you've learned from, where you're like, oh, that's where you stopped. That's where you said, I'm done now. And you did not. You, Francine, you were like, I have more doors to walk through. So I love that. So go ahead.
Well, even in retirement, I have 3 doors in front of me and I'm going to walk through all 3 of them.
I love that so much. You're like, I'm choosing all 3. So, okay.
I don't have to pick one.
So a lot of the times when I have talked to people about how to walk forward, so, people will say like, walk forward in confidence. And I'm like, what does that look like? They're like, put your shoulders high and walk in. And I'm like, but how do you walk in with confidence? Like, it just doesn't make sense. If you were to tell me, like, how do you just said, I'm going to walk through all 3 doors. What does that come down to get to that? I'm going to walk through all 3 doors.
What that looks like is knowing that I could do anything I set my mind to doing. And I always lived my life that way.
Yeah.
Even when I was in an abusive marriage, he would take the car to the bar and leave me home alone. We didn't have any money. I walked to college to register for school because I knew that was the path.
Yeah.
And then every day I'd walk to school, then I'd walk to work after school.
Yeah.
And I did what I needed to do to get my degree in electronics.
You did what you needed to do despite someone really screwing you over. Actually, I
think he did me a favor.
He did, yeah. In a when you look at it that way, it is not like this is what it was. He did him, and you did you.
Yeah. Yep.
And he could have supported you. He decided not to, and that's okay. But you still said, okay, I need to go this route, and I'm going this route. And it's not that I need to. I'm going. Like, we're not going to just say I need to and keep saying I need to. We're going to eventually make the steps to go forward. And I love that you said, I'm going to do what I need to do. And that's all you have control over. You said that from the beginning. The only thing we have control over is doing what we need to do. I love that.
What's funny about it, though, is even though I had that attitude and even though I did it multiple times throughout my life, I was still in the victim mentality and didn't understand it until I started going through my 6-step process and quieted my mind, self-reflection, and root cause. So I was in my 50s before I realized that I had it all along, but I was blaming the world for all of the mishaps in my life.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Can you explain what the victim mentality is?
Yes, the victim mentality is like I was talking about the speech contest. Someone loses a speech contest and
Mm-hmm.
blames the timer, blames the judges, blames the
Mm-hmm.
person who sneezed on the other side of the room. It was everybody else's
Yep.
fault, but they
Yeah.
never considered that the audience didn't understand a whole paragraph of their speech.
Mm. Mm. Or
It was
maybe the person was more dynamic, or the literal topic just spoke to them versus
exactly.
your topic. So it's when someone is coming in, we see this a lot, and I'm not sure how old you are, but you look a great girl. So
I'm proud to say I am almost 61.
61, and so you said you started this at 50.
Yes.
So the last 11 years, so you lived 50 years going, that person tried to screw me over. That person's not on my side. That person's out to get me. That didn't work in my favor. The world hates me.
Yep.
Am I correct to say all of
That's
those? Okay.
it. That's it. Yeah.
And then you went, I can't keep doing this. And for 11 years, you have lived. And how does that feel different than the first 50 years?
The difference is I'm not spending all that energy, wasting all that energy being angry,
Mm.
frustrated, and blaming. Now I have all that energy to move forward and spend on
Mm.
me.
Mm. Would you say that you're happier too?
Oh, no contest.
You're like, dumb question,
No,
Tanisha.
no contest. Because instead
Yeah.
of looking at all the injustices in the world, and face it, we all know there are.
Mm-hmm.
There are injustices everywhere. I only spend my energy on things I have control over.
So you're not. So well, let's dig into that, because I think someone might hear that and be like, "Oh, she doesn't care about other people now."
Oh,
That's
no,
not what you're saying.
not at all.
Injustice. Can you explain what that means to you? When it can you explain that, just so that we are on the same page?
Injustice, an abusive ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
Injustice, when I was the only female aircraft electrician, I had to work twice as hard as the men because they didn't want me there.
Mm-hmm.
Injustice, daddy saying, well, why should I put you through college? You're just going to get married and have babies.
Mm.
And just, go on and on and on from there. That's just from my life. I've seen other people going through all of these things. Like at the very beginning, we talked about being comfortable in your skin.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend whose mother bullied her about her acne. And it took her till she was in her 60s to overcome that.
Mm.
Now that's an injustice because she didn't feel worthy or comfortable in her skin till her husband died, and she took this time for self-reflection and meditation to
Mm.
feel comfortable in her own skin. And let me tell you that the difference in her demeanor
Yeah.
has changed so much since then.
So the injustice is what people do or say to you that's mean. That's just, you're like, wow. So what, instead of letting it get you angry, you're just like, and we're not talking. Like we're done. Like I'm going to go this way. Versus sitting in it and wallowing. Like, someone recently told me, I laughed it off, but I also at first was really upset. It was, Dr. Keating, you have a lot of potential if you do these things. And I was like, what? I'm not 10 years old. First off, I have fulfilled potential. But I had to pause for a second. It took a couple of days because it really was eating at me because I was already feeling sensitive. But I wasted a couple of days going, what does that person know? Da, 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 da. Versus saying, this might be something coming from you about you that you feel that you needed to say that to me. Because everything you pointed out, it literally contradicted everything you said. You said, oh, do all of these things. I did all of these things. And you're not rating, like I didn't ask you to rate me on these things. Like I didn't ask for your feedback. You just felt that you needed to give this to me. But I let it eat away at me for a couple of days. And so what you're telling me is like, hey, don't waste your energy on that. They said it. Does it apply? Can you use it? Cool. But then after that, let it go. Let it go. Let it fly. And I've always admired people who let things like kind of roll off their back like ducks. And I'm like, I can't do that. And I'm like, but I can. I choose to sit in that conversation and let it beat me up and be like, well, now I'm a failure. I'm not a good professor. I'm not a good wife. I'm not a good mother. And I let it spiral out of control. So now what I have to do is say that feedback came in, and I can say, okay, is there anything I can take away from this? Cool. That was a little rough and harsh in the way that you said that. Thank you, but be kinder. And then I can say, okay, done looking at the feedback. Let's move over. Let's move to the next thing. Can I take anything that I can apply? Yes or no? Okay, no. Let's walk away from it. Because people will be mean. But like you said, I need to understand too that it's not a reflection of me. Most of the time that someone says something really rude, it's something that they have learned. It's a reflection of them and how they feel. And then there is some things where it's like, hey, like like if I was giving a presentation and I asked for your feedback, you could say your delivery on that paragraph wasn't the best. I didn't understand that. I should take that and say, okay, how can I make this better? Not, well, now I'm not a good speaker. Like, no. All you're doing is trying to help me make this better.
Right.
And that's where you're really saying is like, we need to use the right lens to focus on what is actually being said, and then what we're feeding into the energy of that. And that's where I hear the injustice is like, I could literally point down all the injustices that happened to me, or I could say, you know what? Yes, those things happened. Now what can I do with that to make it better? Is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, another thing that I had to recognize is I had some coaches that would say things to me and, pushing back and argue and get mad.
Right.
And then I realized there's something about what they said that triggered me.
That part.
It triggered me.
Yeah.
And it's not what they said.
It's
It's how I responded to it.
Yeah. Because,
That's where the self-reflection and figuring out the root cause comes in. Why did that trigger me? Like my ex-husband, and I'm talking this was in the mid-90s. I was going through fertility treatments, couldn't get pregnant. And he said, what kind of a woman are you anyways? You can't give me a baby. Ooh, that's where the wall built up where it got, I didn't even want to deal with children anymore.
Yeah. Because, but first off, him saying that was utterly rude, disrespectful, for sure. But what did it do inside of you that you then were like, no to being around any child? What did that do?
It kept me from my destiny, because my destiny was to have this message for children.
Man, if I had this message.
It took me longer to get there because I had to break that negative programming.
And you had to, it's so hard, I think, to sometimes reflect on how that hit us. And what I shared too about the person telling me like, you have so much potential. I've heard that over and over and over again. And I remember it actually was triggered back to several times that I was told by my parents, like, you would have so much potential if you were smarter, prettier, this, that. And so when that was said, I was like, oh, that hurt really bad. And then it's like, oh, but is there anything in value of what the person is actually saying? No. Then I'm not going to allow it to ruin my day, my week, my month, my year. And that's what you're saying is this man said this to you and you pushed off your destiny to sharing this. Like, I would have loved to have this as a teenager and I didn't, but now I get it as an adult and I get to share it with the people that I know and say, go read this book, go read these steps. Let's do this together and watch how we can grow in this year. So you guys, I want you to buy, it's called The Magic Library with Sparkle Feathers and Princess Francie.
It's
now
on Amazon, and the easiest way to find it is look up my name.
Francine. How do you pronounce your last name?
Juline.
Oh, I love that. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah. I was like either German or Swedish. Is there anything you would like to add before we end?
I would also like to add that I'm the founder of the Confidence Club for Kids, which is a container in my website to keep kids off of social media.
Yeah.
And I have science videos and
Mm.
eating tips and confidence builders for mostly grades 1 through 5, maybe 6 and 7, to get these
Yeah.
kids confident before they get to middle school.
I love that. And even if you're in middle school or high school, I'm pretty sure everything that Francine shared with us, you could literally use. Like, I'm literally going to start implementing going on walks more, because I'm like, I know, like, with panic and anxiety, that's not what people tell you. It's like, get this medication, get that medication, go to this, go to that, do. And you're like, unplug. And that is such a big thing, is that we need to unplug and be present so that our brain and our body can be calm. Then we need to analyze. Then we need to find the root. Then we need to be able to be honest with ourselves in taking action. And then we need to step into where we need to go. So if you guys want to follow Francine, please do buy her book from Amazon. That would be a huge blessing to her. Have your kids read it. Teenagers, adults, like everyone, buy a copy. And just let's go.
But the adults are liking it just as much as the kids. These pictures
I love it. Oh, those are adorable. Look at that. Look at that artwork. I love it. All right, you guys, make sure you go and follow. And then if you guys have any questions, let us know. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure to subscribe, turn on your notifications so that you get episode updates, and let Francine know if you have any questions. Have a great day, guys.